What's up, everybody? NFL Week 4 is upon us. Nick Whalen, John McKechnie here. John, the Dogs, they kept eating in Week 3. Yet another big day, big weekend overall for the Underdogs. 8-8 against the spread in Week 3. We once again saw a ton of big dogs not only covering but winning outright. 4 dogs of at least 6.5 or 7 points, depending on where you got it, ended up winning outright. Obviously, the Raiders, the Pats, the Bucks, the Commanders. The biggest dog of each week so far this season has won outright. Makes you worry a little bit about the San Francisco 49ers, who are our first double-digit favorite of the season. They are a 10-point favorite as we record on Wednesday evening. They are, of course, hosting the New England Patriots. John, what are we doing with all these dogs, man? I feel like we're going through the same song and dance every single week. I mean, at some point, this has to stop happening, right?
I think so, and I think this is the week, but we'll unpack that further. But we have some of the bigger spreads we've seen. Last week was pretty tight. The biggest favorite, of course, being the Bengals. Didn't go well for them. Of course, we'll get to them a little bit more later. But we have a lot of big spreads this week. Between the Denver Jets game, Houston, Jacksonville, San Francisco, New England, and even Kansas City and the Chargers. With everything that's going on with Justin Herbert, we see an inflated number there. So I do think, unlike last week where, we had the unbelievable, I think the 4 biggest underdogs of the week all won outright between the Giants, Broncos, Rams, and Commanders. I think we'll see a little bit more of the favorites coming through this week, but picking which one is obviously very tricky given the trends that we've seen so far.
But which of these big favorites this week, whether it's the Jets, who are big favorites at home against Denver, you got Houston as a big favorite against Jacksonville, San Francisco over New England, Kansas City, a big favorite over the Chargers, like you mentioned. I'm not going to ask you to pick, which one is most in danger of not covering, but which of these dogs could lose outright this week? Or which favorite, excuse me.
Which favorite do I think could lose outright? I'm sorry to say that I'm not believing in your Jaguars. To do this one. Monday was that was hard to watch that. But I think that the one that's in most danger probably is San Francisco, just because we've seen that they are 10-point favorites, and I do have a certain lean on this game, but New England has the rest advantage, so you worry a little bit less about the travel issue with this one. So that certainly helps. And New England is a hard-nosed team. I know that they got relatively blown out by the Jets last week, but even still, they are no fun to be playing against. And San Francisco is still pretty shorthanded, I think, all things considered, relative to what their A team would look like coming into this season. So I'm a little bit curious about that. And San Francisco has lost 2 games in a row, both of them on the road, of course, but still, you have your eye out on them. And obviously, a 10-point favorite losing outright would be pretty shocking, but in the context of this season, the way it's gone, would it really be?
It would almost be more shocking if the Niners win that game at this point, John, because history strongly dictates over these last 3 weeks that you do not want to be the biggest favorite of the week, and that is exactly where the shorthanded 49ers stand. Like you said, you'll have more thoughts on that game, so we'll save any more commentary there. Every week, we're each going to pick 3 games we want to discuss. We'll typically have a strong lean on each of those games. And I'll let you lead us off, John. Where are we going first?
All right, we'll go down to Carolina. This line has moved a good bit since Sunday and Monday's results. And I think it's understandable, right? Like that's human nature. You saw the results of both games. Carolina looks like an actual NFL team now, which is nice. It's nice to have a full 32-team league as opposed to everyone and then the Panthers. I had some fun like looking at futures odds, and you just scroll down to the bottom, and like Carolina had like 4 extra zeros attached to whatever odds that they were, whether it was Super Bowl, making the playoffs, division, you name it. Now they have some semblance of a team. Andy Dalton, of course, has history with the Bengals, and the Bengals are 0-3. And haven't looked great yet. But what I really kind of took away from Monday's game is the offense does kind of look like it's back. And I know that Washington's defense isn't overly imposing, but I was really encouraged to see Jamar Chase get loose. I thought T. Higgins, even if the box score didn't really reflect it, I thought that he moved around great. I thought that, for the most part, he looked like T. Higgins. And Yoshi has been a really nice kind of guy to slot in that offense. They've been running the ball pretty well too. Chase Brown averaging almost 9 yards per carry last week. So I did find a good stat from our friends at Action Network. 8 teams have been road favorites after starting 0-3 over the last decade, and they are 5-2-1 against the spread. So, this is a number that was 7 on Sunday on the look ahead. Now it's 4.5. I know the Bengals are in desperation mode, and the Panthers might not be as bad as we thought, as long as they have Andy Dalton back there. I think this is the proverbial get right spot for the Bengals, and I think you'd be remiss to kind of like overreact to what the Panthers did a week ago. Obviously, they're not going to have Adam Thielen either. So for me, I think the Panthers come back down to earth a little bit, and the Bengals kind of reintroduce themselves into the divisional race here.
Yeah, what's crazy about Cincinnati is, I saw a stat that they still have like a 36% chance to make the playoffs. And we know when you start 0-3, I mean, it's exceedingly unlikely. I think, the only team to make the postseason in the last 20 or so years after starting 0-3 was that Texans team in 2018. But you look at the amount of parity around the league. It's not like we have a bunch of 3-0 teams running away with divisions and, building these big leads in the AFC. So Cincinnati's not out of it. I don't feel like Monday night, as crushing of a loss as that was, and as unlikely, by the way, of a loss as that was. I mean, in the Super Bowl era, the Bengals became the first team to lose a game in which they scored at least 4 touchdowns, did not punt, and did not turn the ball over. I mean, they played, I wouldn't say a perfect offensive game. They missed a field goal, but still, I mean, they played about as well as they could have offensively, especially reintroducing T. Higgins back into the mix. The big question is the defense, right? I mean, can they get enough stops against the Carolina Panthers? A ridiculous sentence to have to say on camera in 2024, but that's the real question here, right? I mean, they were without both of their interior tackles on Monday night. We saw, Washington had no trouble converting 3rd and 4th downs. Virtually every single time Washington had a 3rd down, it felt like it was 3rd and short. They were able to use Jaden Daniels effectively to pick those up. They were able to rip off some big plays. They got receivers involved. I don't know where to lean on this game, John. And I will say there are some 4s out there now as well. We are seeing a little bit of movement here. You can still find it at 4.5. I'm with you on the Cincinnati offense. I think we saw what we needed to see for them. I think Chase Brown running as effectively as he did kind of got covered up in just the general storyline of Washington winning that game. But overall, I am with you. I think there is a post Andy Dalton takeover hangover coming for the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, it'll correct. They sort of ambushed a Raiders team that I think people themselves kind of overrated a little bit after their Baltimore win the week prior, and a lot of survivor entries went down with the ship on that one, backing the Raiders, just thinking that going against the Panthers was the Konami code to survivor this year. There really is no safe path in survivor this year. It really is unbelievable. But I do think that the offense comes back to earth a little bit. That I will say, like the odd thing about the Bengals defense up the middle that I noticed was, in goal line situations, Washington wasn't actually having success, like pounding it in. They had to get creative, and it will be interesting to see if Dave Canales can have that same level of creativity. The big guy touchdown, or that like read option play that Washington converted with Jaden Daniels, where the defense was totally keyed up to stop the run up the middle to Brian Robinson. Daniels slips around the right tackle. Huge conversion there. So I don't know if you can do the same things with Andy Dalton that you can do with Jaden Daniels. And I think that therein lies the challenge for Dave Canales. This is a solid enough run game for Carolina. So I think that, Chuba Hubbard presents his own issues for the Cincinnati run defense. But all in all, I think that this is a game where the Cincy offense faces enough little resistance to where I think it's going to be hard for Carolina to keep up over 4 quarters.
You're going from one of the most mobile quarterbacks in the NFL to arguably the least mobile in Andy Dalton too. And I think taking that threat off the table can only help things for Cincinnati defensively. And like you said, the Panthers, they kind of used their element of surprise game last week against the Raiders. I don't think they're catching anybody off guard this week. I mean, it would be almost inconceivable for this Bengals team to start 0-4 with back-to-back losses to the Commanders and the Carolina Panthers. So I will ride with you on that one. We'll put the Bengals minus 4.5 up on the board. John, my first game, I am walking directly into a line that has been nothing but a trap so far this season. We have a favorite of more than a touchdown. I like the Kansas City Chiefs this week at the LA Chargers. The number's at 7.5 right now at DraftKings and Fanduel. If the Chargers were healthy, obviously this number would not be where it is, but I think I would still take them to cover. This Chiefs team, it's still looking a little 2023-esque in terms of this offense, right? Not looking as easy as we thought it might. We kind of thought this might be the year where Patrick Mahomes starts to look like the Patrick Mahomes of old. He's throwing for 45 touchdowns. He's putting up 300-yard games. That has not been the case for the Kansas City Chiefs, but I think they are in a great spot here because I don't know if Justin Herbert is going to play. He's dealing with a high ankle sprain. If he does play, you would expect that he's going to be pretty limited, and I think there would be a pretty decent chance that, much like last week, he doesn't even make it through the game. We saw Taylor Heineke come on in relief. If he has to start this game, good luck. He took more sacks than he had pass attempts last week. This is a game that they ended up losing by 10 to the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Chargers also have their bye coming up in week 5. Does it really make sense to push Herbert in this spot when you have the bye coming up? You get him that extra week of rest. You say, whatever, if we lose this game, so be it. We'll pack it in. We're 2-2. We come out of the bye a lot healthier. I don't know that Justin Herbert plays. And again, even if he does, what does he look like? On top of that, Derwin James out for this game. His appeal for banging into Pat Freiermuth immediately denied. He's not playing. Joey Bosa was out last week. We don't really have a firm update on him yet, but very, very possible that he could miss this game. I think it's very likely that at least one, if not both, of the Chargers starting tackles, Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt, especially Alt, are probably going to miss this game. And they're also without their number one receiver, Josh Palmer, who's dealing with an elbow and a calf injury. He could very well miss another game. I get that, Mahomes throughout his career has struggled when he's favored by more than 3. He's covering at only a 47% clip. The Chiefs have a history of kind of messing around in these type of games. I think the Chargers are just too banged up. If they can lose by 10 to the Pittsburgh Steelers, why can't they lose by 10 to the Kansas City Chiefs? I know this game is in LA. Does that even matter? It's the worst home field advantage in the NFL. I don't think it matters. Mahomes 16-1 straight up in road division games in his career. He's 10-7 against the spread in those spots. I'm on KC.
I think that's the right call. I think that, in the end, it comes down to can Kansas City's offense really, really get on track, because it's looked good, but not quite up to expectations to this point. But they're still routinely putting up over 20, and it's just the Chargers are that it's just such a huge issue personnel wise. I mean, Herbert on one leg or Taylor Heineke, that immediately puts you at a huge disadvantage. The key pieces on defense. So, like you said, this is a spot where this year taking the favorite here is a trap, but I'm in to walk into it with you here, friend.
Yeah, one more thing I'll say here is, you think of the Chargers as this very good defensive team, and I think over the course of the season that will likely prove true. They played the Raiders, the Panthers, and the Steelers so far. They faced Gardner Minshew, they faced Bryce Young at his worst, and they faced Justin Fields. This is a huge level up in terms of the competition that you're facing just at the quarterback position in Mahomes. And again, I wouldn't be surprised if the Chiefs do, come out, struggle a little bit. Mahomes throws another weird pick, early in the game, and you're like, oh boy, here we go again. But I don't think they need to get to 30 in this game. It's like if they could get to 23, 24, I think that's probably enough.
I think so too. And those offensive line issues for the Chargers, I mean, last week getting totally caved in by TJ Watt and company. It doesn't get a lot easier this week when it's Chris Jones and company like that. That's going to be a problem. Like whatever quarterback is back there is going to be kind of running for his life. And if it's Herbert, he's not going to be doing it particularly effectively. And to Heineke's case, he's not avoiding the sacks very well. I do love Taylor Heineke. I think he's a lot of fun when he's able to be upright. He's kind of like a stunt man that plays quarterback, but that's not going to be enough to keep things close against the Chiefs.
All right, John, you're up next. Where are you taking us?
All right, Monday night. The nightcap. I personally very much enjoy the Monday Night Football doubleheaders. I saw some odd hemming and hawing on Monday on Twitter about that, but twice the football. Plus, if one of the games is a clunker, which we get Titans-Dolphins to open things up. Like, I'm glad that it's not the only game.
Yeah, we're on clunker watch for that one.
Majorly, and therefore, this Lions Seahawks, like they don't play each other. They're obviously not in the same division, but they are always a good bet for a good time. Like that over the last 3 times that they've met, so dating back to I guess the 2021 season, I think the average points scored in those 3 games, the last 3 times they've squared off, over 80. Like just right at like 80 points per game is the average. They had one where both of them were scoring into the 40s. We've had some thrilling games in that as well. So I think that the over-under here at 47, I think famously people have kind of noticed that Dan Campbell with the high totals, the under has come in a lot. But I think once we've reached this 47 number, I do think that that's in range to see an over come through. I can absolutely see that. I think that the Seahawks, kind of to your point about the Chargers and who they've faced so far, the Seahawks, they got Bo Nix in his debut. They got Jacoby Brissett in the Patriots, which, they had to scrape and claw, but they still got it done. And then Skylar Thompson and Tim Boyle. I mean, that's going into Detroit. That's kind of a problem. Going into Detroit, Monday night, raucous environment. I do think that the Lions, I know the hook, can kind of scare you here with it being 3.5. That's past that key number, but I think that the Lions can come out here and win this one by a touchdown. And I do like the over in this one as well, for the record.
The total is really interesting to me because the recent history between these teams implies that the total should be like double what it is. I mean, the final score of those last three meetings, and like you said, they played at the end of the 2021 season, they played in 22, and then they played last season, 51-29, 48-45, 37-31. Those were all Seattle wins, by the way. So that they are carrying a 3-game winning streak over Detroit into this game. Detroit is 3-0 to the under so far this season. Lions games are going under by about 14 points per game. And look, it helps when you have a total of like 50 last week against Arizona, and neither team really scores in the second half. But there's something with this Detroit offense where they're moving the ball well. They're not finishing drives at the same rate that they were last season. We saw it over and over against Arizona. We saw it to an even higher degree in week 2 against Tampa Bay when they were 1 of 7 in the red zone. It does feel like eventually that floodgate is going to break, and we're going to see the Lions offense that we think they can be. I do wonder though, the iffiness of Sam Laporta midweek. He's dealing with a low ankle sprain, which my understanding is that is better than a high ankle sprain, I think. But it's possible that he could not play. It's also possible that he could play and be limited as he was in the second half against Arizona. Does that tip the scales for you at all in this game?
No, because we haven't seen Laporta carry this offense yet. So it's something where I think Jameson Williams starting to arrive gives Goff still that second, really viable pass catcher alongside Amon-Ra St. Brown. The run game's been terrific for the most part. Montgomery running for over 100 yards last week, and Gibbs chipping in nicely as well. So Laporta, I think that's more of like a fantasy concern for me than something that really lowers my projection for this Lions offense this week.
For my second game, John, we are traveling to Indianapolis, Indiana, where the Indianapolis Colts are hosting the Pittsburgh Steelers. We got the Steelers as 1.5-point road favorites. They're only one of 2 teams to start the year 3-0 against the spread, Minnesota being the other. I will start by saying, John, that I love the under here. It's sitting at 39.5 at DraftKings. If you can find a 40 out there, I implore you to do so. Steelers games are going under by 12.7 points per game so far. Colts have also been an under team. Their only over came in week 1 against Houston, and a lot of that was some fluky big plays for Indy, and obviously allowing the Texans to put up 29 in that game. Steelers are 69% to the under on the road since 2015. So we'll start by saying we like the under, but I also like the Steelers to win this game and cover the 1.5. There are a lot of things going on with the Colts right now, John. They have run the fewest plays in the NFL. They have the lowest time of possession by far in the NFL. They're averaging about 21 minutes of possession per game. You cannot live that way in the NFL. They have the lowest combined time of possession through 3 games of any team in the last 25 years. Any team. You got to go all the way back to the 99 Cleveland Browns to find a team that has possessed the ball less than the Indianapolis Colts. So part of this is I think the Steelers keep it going. I think this is the toughest defense that the Colts will have faced so far. I think they'll be able to contain Jonathan Taylor. And part of it is kind of a fate of Anthony Richardson, man. And I still love Richardson, the player. It feels like he's a rookie in a lot of ways in terms of the number of games that he's played. Like I'm nowhere close to, pulling the plug and clamoring for Joe Flacco or anything like that. But it just hasn't been good, man. The decision-making has been terrible. The accuracy has been terrible. I don't think they're using him as effectively as a runner as I thought that he would. And he's got 6 interceptions already on the year. No other quarterback even has 5 picks so far this season. I think the Colts, the way that we've seen them struggle over these last couple of weeks, they should have been in a pretty decent spot, I thought, against Green Bay in week 2. Wildly unprepared for that game. You give up over 350 passing yards to Caleb Williams, who'd come nowhere near that through the first 2 games of the season. In a lot of ways, lucky to win that game last week. I don't know if that just magically turns around over the course of 6 or 7 days here when you have the Steelers defense coming in.
I don't either. I think you look at the averages here, and combined, these teams are averaging under 40 points per game. The Steelers are giving up, I believe, less than 10 points per game, and that it's just a really tough matchup for Indianapolis because theoretically you want to mitigate the pass rush. You lean on Jonathan Taylor, but leaning on just being a run first, very predictable unit against the Steelers does not feel like a particularly winning formula. I don't feel like on the other side that the Steelers are going to light up the scoreboard by any means. I'd be surprised if they themselves, make it to 20 points in this game. But, mostly this comes down to the unstoppable or the immovable object that is the Steelers defense. And then this Indianapolis offense that finds ways to stop itself all the time on top of it. So it's going to be a long day, I think, for this Indianapolis offense. So I like the call for the Steelers to win this game and to cover, but I think more strongly on the total here for the under.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. I understand that. I mean, obviously with this game being on the road, you have some concerns there, and it does feel like, how long can the Steelers continue to survive, basically scoring 15 to 19 points every single week? But that's part of the reason I like them with this number sitting at 1.5. It essentially feels like a pick the winner game, and I think the Steelers win it. All right, John, your third and final game. Where are we headed?
So we kind of have two sides of the same coin where you're taking the Chiefs in the big number. I'm going to go with the Niners in the big number because I laid out the case earlier that the Niners are theoretically like the most vulnerable of the big underdogs this week to lose outright. And I still think that's true, but I think that the inverse of that is absolutely on the table here, where San Francisco backs against the wall a little bit, 1-2, 2 straight losses, both on the road. They return home. It's a nice advantage for them in that sense. I know that the injuries are still a problem, but they kind of need to go gangbusters here. Like they need to go ballistic on the Patriots. And I think that the Patriots offensively, they are not going to be able to put up much of a fight here. So defensively, they're going to need to get it done. But I think over the course of this game where the Patriots are having these short drives, like going 3 and out, that defense is going to get tired eventually and it's going to wear down. And the offense wasn't necessarily the problem last week for San Francisco. Even with Deebo Samuel being out, Juwan Jennings steps up big. Jordan Mason maybe wasn't quite as good as he was earlier on in the season, but all told, this is a spot where we could be looking up, and this is one of those classic 49ers blowout type of results here. And I know that New England doesn't necessarily profile as a team that gets blown out, but it did happen a week ago against a Jets team that the Niners themselves took care of rather handily. So for me, even though the trends say otherwise thus far this season, give me the Niners big.
All right. 2 weeks in a row, we're taking the 49ers with a big number here. And I just worry about, and this seems like a ridiculous question, I understand. Are we potentially undervaluing the Patriots because of just how terrible they looked on Thursday night? Like a team that was really competitive, won outright against the Bengals in week 1, took the Seattle Seahawks to overtime in week 2, was really able to run the ball extremely effectively in both of those games. I mean, they ran for almost 200 yards on a really good Seattle defense. And I still don't really understand how the Rams won that game in week 3, but they were able to get Kyren Williams going. The efficiency numbers, the overall volume, it's not like Kyren Williams had this incredible game, but whenever they needed to pick up 3 or 4 yards in the second half, it felt like they were able to do it. And part of me just worries about the rebound effect here for New England. The idea that there's no possible way they can be as bad as they were on Thursday night. And are you surprised at all, by the way, at how high this number is given the Niners injuries?
I am definitely, but to go back to your Patriots point, I do find myself having a healthy amount of respect for this Patriots team. I think that they are more so the team that we saw the first 2 weeks than the one that we saw, in prime time. You kind of are able to take a closer magnifying glass to a team, and you watch that game and it was just not going right from the jump, and got uglier as things went along. But I think that the Patriots, they're almost like a Dollar General version of the Steelers or something like that. Like they're going to have to win ugly. They're going to have to win with defense first and foremost, at least until Drake May can kind of take over and get himself into a rhythm, but we're still a little ways away from that coming down the pipeline. So I definitely think that the Patriots are a dangerous team, a team that is going to play a very disciplined brand of football and not burn themselves all that often. But I think if the Niners have any of the powers that we've seen from the last few years, where they've made the NFC Championship, like 5 years in a row, I think we see it here. And ultimately, like the sheer talent advantage that San Francisco has, even with the injuries, is ultimately too much for the Patriots to contend with.
For my final game, John, I will say I considered a couple of dogs here. I do like Buffalo plus 2.5 against Baltimore. I think that's it's such a 50-50 game. I know it's in Baltimore, but if you're giving me points with the Bills, I'm going to take it. And I'm toying with the idea of taking the Minnesota Vikings to win that game outright. I like the Vikings money line at Lambeau Field. I think, catching Jordan Love off the injury is a good spot for Minnesota. That defense, has played as well as any unit in the NFL. But the game that I really want to discuss here, I want to get in the mud. Browns-Raiders. Browns-Raiders. I like the Raiders here. You can get them at 1.5. They're at home. It really comes down to two things for me. One, betting against Deshaun Watson. Unless he's playing against the Jaguars, that has been a very profitable strategy. He's not playing the Jaguars this week. He's playing the Raiders. And you need to check out the Cleveland Browns injury report. I mean, this is by no means a pick in favor of the Raiders. It's not like I love this Raiders team that just got clocked by the Panthers last week. But look at the injury report for Cleveland. 3 of their top offensive linemen are unlikely to play in this game. Wyatt Teller's on IR. He's their best guard. Jack Conklin, Jedrick Wills, both those guys banged up. David Njoku hasn't played since week 1. Amari Cooper, who was great in week 3 against the Giants, he got banged up late in that game. Jerome Ford popped up on the injury report. Myles Garrett is dealing with 3 different injuries at this point. He's got a foot injury, he's got a thigh injury, he's got an Achilles injury. He didn't practice at all on Wednesday. I know Kevin Stefanski said, yeah, I think he's going to play. Sure, I mean, it's Myles Garrett. I mean, he's still going to be Myles Garrett to some degree, but when you're dealing with that many injuries, I don't think he's going to have that same effect. This is a game that most people are going to want to stay away from. In my heart of hearts, I would love to stay away from it, but I think this is a pretty reasonable bounce back spot for the Raiders. And I think this could be the last start for Deshaun Watson as the quarterback of the Cleveland Browns. I think we could see Jameis next week.
I've had designs of speculatively adding Jameis in Superflex leagues recently, and I wonder if I've missed the window, or maybe I can still squeak him in before he does take over, because this Deshaun Watson stuff, the clock is ticking. I think that, last week, one of our best bets was taking the Giants and the points. And it was, partially, a fear of the big number for the favorites. But it's more so that this Cleveland team has just looked completely out of sorts. They're really banged up, like you said, now going into this one as well. So, and I think there's something to be said for the Raiders taking the embarrassing loss the way that they did a week ago. Like Antonio Pierce, I do find to be a good coach, and he's been good against the spread for the most part. Smaller sample, of course, but yeah, no, I feel good about the Raiders here, mostly because I feel that bad about the Browns. They are just out of sorts. There's just something cosmically wrong with this team right now, and it's hard to trust them. So I'm just I think betting against the Browns as their current iteration stands is going to be a good strategy.
The Giants fumbled the opening kickoff last week, and the Browns immediately scored a touchdown and still lost that game outright against the Giants, man. And, I don't know that the Raiders are too much worse than the Giants. They don't have Malik Neighbors, but if Amari Cooper is out or limited, it's like the Raiders have the best weapon in this game, and maybe they do anyway in Devontae Adams. We started to see Jacoby Myers come alive in garbage time last week. I'm still really high on Brock Bowers. I think the big thing that really worries me about the Raiders is the total lack of a running game. I don't know that changes this week, and it's just really hard to win games in the NFL when you can't run the ball and the other team knows that you can't run the ball. But again, I could just keep listing off stats for the Cleveland Browns about how terrible this offense has been. I mean, dead last in offensive EPA, dead last in passing EPA, 30th in total passing yardage. They're dead last in net yards per attempt. I mean, there's that stat going around this week that Deshaun Watson is off to like literally the worst start of any Browns quarterback through 3 weeks in the last 25 years. I mean, think of some of the quarterbacks that the Browns have had, John, in the last 25 years. Think about the photo of the jersey with all the names taped over and written over and taped more. Think of all those guys. Deshaun Watson's been worse than them.
Do I need to have my head examined that the first quarterback that I circled as the prototypical, that was a Browns quarterback? I can't believe that happened. Charlie Fry. Is that weird?
Fry. No, No, I mean, there's like 20 guys you could have pulled, and I would have been like, yeah, I think that kind of makes sense. I mean, I always think of Derek Anderson. He was probably, I mean, he's the gold standard, I think, of Browns quarterbacks over the last 25 years. All right, John, look, what do you like?
So I do believe that Andy Dalton does rise the tide of this offense in Carolina. So I do like Deontay Johnson. His route participation is great. The snap count's great. Adam Thielen being sidelined. I like over 5.5 receptions for Deontay. I think he's going to be very busy this week. If you're still out there on Thursday night, I do like Devin Singletary plus money, plus 105 to score a touchdown, anytime touchdown. I like another anytime touchdown for Juwan Jennings. I think that, last week, we're not going to see 3 touchdowns again from Juwan, but I do think that, again, I like the Niners offense in this one. He's going to be heavily involved in this one. So give me Jennings anytime touchdown. That you can get that at plus 185 at Fanduel. Other side of the Panthers game, Jamar Chase got loose last week. I don't think that this Panthers secondary is much better than what Washington has. I think they're going to have equally difficult time slowing Chase down. So give me the over on 75.5 receiving yards. And then lastly, this one's just more of a vibes one, but Caleb Williams, I think that we're going to see him cross over that 223 passing yardage mark. I think that it's less a function of him making it look good. Like, it's not going to be a pretty 223, but the Bears' run game issues they're not Raiders level, but they aren't good. DeAndre Swift is really hurting my heart as a big Georgia fan, but he doesn't look like the guy. That looks like a huge like albatross of a contract thus far. Caleb is going to have to go to the air a lot. The Bears don't really have a choice. Give me over 223.
I like CJ Stroud to pass for at least 275 yards against the Jaguars and get that at plus 105. He has not gone over that number so far this year. I think it happens this week. The Jags are terrible against the pass. If there's one redeeming quality for this Jags team, it's that they've actually been pretty good against the run. Houston, not a great running team, especially if Joe Mixon isn't out there. I think this is a game that they are going to have to win and will win through the air. Stroud went over in both games against Jacksonville last season. I also like Nico Collins over 73.5 receiving yards in that game. I'm going back to the well on Brock Bowers. Completely burned me last week. I mean, obviously the Raiders just no-showed that game against Carolina. I still think he's a really good player. I like the 40-plus receiving yards for Brock Bowers this week. DK Metcalf, 60-plus receiving yards against Detroit, minus 125. I don't know that Seattle's going to be able to run the ball. Certainly not as effectively as they did last week against Miami. I think we're going to see Geno Smith airing it out. I think this could be a 40-plus attempt game for Geno, and I think that benefits DK Metcalf, of course. This one feels free to me, John, and somebody will probably clip this after the show when he runs for 100 yards, but Rachaad White under 35.5 rushing yards. I mean, he's yet to go over this number. Todd Bowles is openly saying that we want to see more Bucky Irving in this offense. The Eagles defense, the season-long numbers don't look great against the run, but I thought they did a pretty dang good job against Kamara last week. 26 carries, keeping him, well under 100 yards. I don't even know if Rachaad White's going to see the workload this week to get close to 35.5. So it's a low number, but I like the under there. And then if we're firing darts, John, Cordero Patterson, anytime touchdown, plus 320 at the DraftKings Sportsbook. I think he's going to be heavily involved this week. I don't think Jaylen Warren is going to play. And you could just see Cordero Patterson plunging his way in from like the 4-yard line.
You could. And do they use him at all in the return game anymore? Is he past his prime on that?
Well, first of all, I'm very disappointed in the dynamic kick. Too many teams just willing to take the touchback. I think we need to more heavily penalize that. Like I was watching that like a hawk in the preseason. Scott Fishbowl, a popular fantasy league, they count return yardage, and I'm like, I need to know who's returning for everybody. I haven't even been thinking about it. So many teams are just willing to take the touchback every week. Pittsburgh did not have a kick return last week against the Chargers, so unclear. Calvin Austin's returning punts, if you're wondering.
Okay, Calvin Austin, fun player, but kind of a gadgety guy. I appreciated his work during his days at Memphis. Obviously appreciate all the work that CP has done. Really fun player over the years. So I think that's a great read on the fact that this Steelers backfield isn't going to look how it normally does. CP is going to get more opportunities, and we know that the Steelers kind of need to get right up to the edge of the end zone to score. Yeah, I'm liking this at over 3-1.
All right. John, we got two big things we need to take care of before we head out. We got to get our parlays and locks of the week. Tell you what, John, the unders parlay came through for us last week. Colts, Bears, Steelers, Chargers, Giants, Browns, all three of those games went under. Cash that at plus 595. I will let you lead us off with your parlay of the week for week 4.
That's the thing of beauty that the Evanescence parlay went in.
How could it not?
Exactly. I mean, we should have known right then and there. I will go with the under in the Indianapolis-Pittsburgh game. I will take the Lions minus 3.5. I will take the Bengals minus 4.5. That'll get you around 6-1. And flip it over to you. What's Whalen cooking up on the parlay world?
I got a Road Dogs money line parlay that I want to throw out there. We're getting a little loose this week. We're feeling ourselves after the Evanescence parlay. Rams money line over the Bears, Bills money line over the Ravens, Vikings money line at Lambeau Field over the Packers, plus 916 at the DraftKings Sportsbook. And look, if you're itching for another unders parlay, here's where I would go. Pittsburgh, Indy under 39.5, Denver and the Jets under 39.5, Cleveland, Vegas under 37, plus 589.
Turn up. I'm glad that you're keeping the unders parlay alive. I mean, as long as the getting's good, keep on with it.
Hey, I see no reason not to. Got to keep riding it. John, your lock of the week. Who's it going to be?
Give me the Bengals. They're getting off the mat this week. They're winning, and they're winning convincingly. I can't take Carolina beating the Raiders as this omen that they are drastically, radically different, or at least some semblance of a top 20 team. They are still a bottom 5 team. They're just a NFL team at this point, whereas they weren't when they had Bryce Young back there. But Cincinnati goes in there and takes care of business, gets in the one column.
All right, you're locking up the Bengals. I'm locking up the Texans. If I'm getting them at 6.5, I'm locking up Houston. I don't see the Jags picking themselves up off the mat. Like we said earlier, I think there's just too much working against this team right now. They have too many holes to try to plug at once. It's not like there's just one thing that's wrong with this team. The offense is terrible. They don't get any pass rush. They have injuries. The offensive line might be the worst in the NFL. They just lost their only good linebacker, Foye Oluokun, for a few weeks. You're down Tyson Campbell. He's still on IR. I do not see them keeping pace with this Houston Texans team.